Everyone hopes to win a Million Maker. Everyone wants to have these big outcomes.
One of the biggest lessons I think that a lot of people don't think about enough is just like the sheer, like, am I playing against top 10 people on the Roto Grinders leaderboard? I mean, that's stupid. I don't want to play tennis against Roger Federer. You're gonna lose.
Should I go with my gut? What do I do? And how have you developed that gut and that feel?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, I guess.
Hey, my name's Andy Baldacci. I'm the CEO of SaberSim, and we help our players win more money at DFS. I'm standing here a little bit outside of Austin. That's actually at a really cool spot. We're gonna go check in a little bit. But I'm here with a Rolex because one of our players just won $1 million on FanDuel. And as part of our Winner's Circle promotion, if you win $1 million while using our logo as your avatar, we get you a Rolex. And so Spencer, AKA Elusive Smoke, just took down $1 million on FanDuel. I'm out here with this Rolex. We're gonna give it to him in just a minute. All right, let's get Spencer his Rolex. I was worried it'd be tough to find you in here, but it's just a couple guys drinking in a barn. Spencer?
Whoa.
Got a special surprise for you, man. I'll let you do the honors if you want to open that up.
Yeah.
But congrats on winning the $1 million.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Spencer won $1 million on FanDuel. And like I was saying before, it's part of the Winner's Circle promotion. If you win $1 million with our logo, get you a Rolex. And so obviously winning $1 million is pretty special in its own right. So I'm not gonna say this is better, but it's kind of the cherry on top. It gives you something to think about every time you look down at your watch. What do you think?
Wow, well, that is something special. Looks so much better than the picture.
All right, so Spencer is not the only one to win a Rolex this year. Actually, we've given away 4 Rolexes this NFL season, and I want to give away more. It's been an expensive year, but I want to spend even more money giving away these Rolexes. I want to get you a Rolex. So just head over to SaberSim.com, start your free 5-day trial, and see why so many winners are using SaberSim. What better way to just kind of dig in a bit more about the $1 million win? I'm sure if we were live streaming this, everyone in Discord would be like, oh, just like give me the settings he used to get this lineup. And like, it's not that simple. Yeah. But before we get into the actual win, I kind of want to rewind a little bit and just talk about your story.
Yeah, so I guess technically my first contest, if someone has the data and can look it up, was like 7 or 8 years ago in college. I did some baseball stuff and won a little bit, but didn't really think too much of it, and then started my job and got busy with that. 3 or 4 years ago, I sort of had a little free time and wanted to pick up something and started getting more seriously back into DFS and started playing all the 10-cent and 25-cent contests and having some success there.
When did SaberSim come into your world?
For a while, I used Fantasy Cruncher, I think like most people did. And then I got sort of upset with Fantasy Cruncher a little bit and started designing my own optimizer. When I discovered SaberSim, a lot of the concepts that I was doing on my own were very similar. And I was tired of troubleshooting every slate, not pulling in the right IDs or insert a million problems that I'm sure you're very familiar with.
Yeah.
And was like, well, this is capturing the essence of what I'm trying to do. And they can worry about the million different slate combinations. And I was just focusing on NBA and NFL, and y'all have CSGO and MMA and a million other things that I wouldn't play if I had to do the optimizer work myself. I saw that y'all did all the support and was like, well, if it can capture a majority of the work and I can focus on other things, the net value add in total would be higher. And then on top of that, it's nice to not have to worry about fixing everything yourself.
When we look at all of our customers, we have people on one end like you or like Keith or like Giant Squid who can program to different levels, but like can write your own code.
I'm sure they're both much better than me. I just hack away and make things happen.
Can like even think about building your own optimizer, can even think about these other things. And then we have people who are not that technical. And it can seem like what you do or what some of the other guys do is unapproachable. And honestly, it might be.
At a certain point, if you can explain a majority of the variance with 90%, that's good enough. Exactly. I don't have to explain that extra 10%, and I can find workarounds to get that extra 10% in much less net total time than maybe just doing it all from scratch myself.
Right. It's like the way we've thought about SaberSim is it's not some like magic money printing machine. It's not as though click a button, print money, and you're going to walk away rich. we try to do the things that the best players are already doing, and we try to do it as good as we can automatically. And like we invest heavily to keep getting better and better at that. It's like you're saying, you're finding ways where these things that SaberSim does is doing them basically as good as I could. You know that's not where you're adding the most value.
Yeah.
And so if you can outsource it to us so that you can focus on the other things, then like you're just gonna get a better return on your time that way. In your day job, you're a trader. How do some of those lessons kind of apply to your approach of DFS?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest lessons I think that a lot of people don't think about enough is just like the sheer like variance and like things can go wrong that you're not expecting, and the risk management components. People truly don't understand like the jump from the $4 20 max to like the $15 150 max. I truly think that's the hardest jump in DFS. Is like the variance you have. Like if you run bad,
it's tougher competition,
yes.
way more top heavy
Yes.
of a prize pool. Yeah.
The variance is higher. I mean, if you're going to play that, you need to expect, even if you think you're really good, there's going to be a lot of variance, and you have to be prepared for it. And there really isn't a buy-in level between those two. Like you can get creative with single entry, you can play more slates. There are some things you can do, but like truly, like you have to make that jump, and that's really hard. And I think a lot of people get wiped out trying to make that jump, and they don't account for the variance that they're going to see making that. I mean, if you're going to play the 100K to first like NBA contest, you need to be prepared to lose at least 100,000. Like I know that sounds crazy.
It's true though.
And I think a lot of players don't recognize that variance. And I think a lot of good players, it's not to their advantage to point out like how bad things can get. I mean, we talked about some of the numbers earlier, but yeah, there's significant downside, especially if you're playing for $1 million to first, which obviously everyone wants. That's sort of everyone shooting for it. I mean, even some of the best players waited years to finally win.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, like, I think on some level, everyone hopes to win a Million Maker. Everyone wants to have these big outcomes, but most of us are pretty happy kind of doing well, making it like a profitable side hobby or a hobby that pays for itself. And I think we do our best not to oversell the challenges. And that's why, like with the profit plan, that's kind of our approach of you should be playing more of the low buy-in, mass multi-entry things. Just spread out your risk, work in some of the single entry things, and like maximize your ROI as you're building your bankroll. But you're right, it's like there is that point where you've got to take a jump.
But I mean, there's also a point where it's like, this variance is too high for my risk tolerance.
Right.
And you have to understand truly what that entails, beginning to end, how long it might take.
Right. And that was actually like why we built the contest sims originally, was to help model out the variance, because it's like you can show the simulations, you can show the math and know the math, and you still don't realize how big the variance is. Like it's one of those things where it is just way higher than people expect. But I'm curious for you, when you were moving up in stakes, like when you were taking that jump, did it take a while for that shot to stick and to play those, or what happened?
Obviously, as most people can figure out, the $4 to the 15 was like the hardest for me, because you sort of have to make that jump. And I mean, it took a while. Once you hit the first one, you get some confidence, but you know, you look at your buy-ins and you're like, man, I'm down quite a bit on this buy-in, but you also know like, well, you know, I won. I mean, the funny thing was I actually won, I think 4 or 5 seats before I won the $15.
Really?
Like, I ran
for one of the live finals.
Yes, extraordinarily well in the satellites, and I don't play them that often, so it was like a 1,200% ROI, or even, I mean, it was just absurd.
Yeah.
And then it's like you look at your $15 and it's like, well, I'm down 30 or 40%. It's like, well, am I doing the right thing? And then eventually, I've obviously won a couple 100Ks at this point, so like you push through that, but like those are still great contests, and over enough sample, like you should be profitable if you're, you know, obviously playing the right way. I'm not going to say SaberSim can guarantee it, but it definitely helps.
Right, and I think it's like you've got to know when to have faith and know when something's off. Getting an early win, or just one of those first wins that you get, gives you confidence, like, all right, like I can do this. And I think there's a huge amount that goes into someone who's newer to the game of like, they might not have that win for a while. And so it's like finding ways to improve their process to make that more likely. But even then, once you've had the win.
Or even to reduce variance. Like the greatest asset you have in almost any market, but definitely DFS as a new player, is you're not like experience contest excluded for one, and you have infinite liquidity. I see some $3, but it's a lot I don't.
Yeah,
so I can't even see them, much less play them. And if you're starting out, you can play those, and you can play those for a long time.
Exactly.
I made a ton of money in those contests with like 30, 40, 50% ROIs, like really strong ROIs. It's a huge advantage for newer players, obviously, to get into the shallow end of the pool, as it were, not going the deep end, but also just like you don't have that liquidity problem that like as you move up the stakes, you do eventually run into.
And to give people some context around like liquidity problem, if they're not familiar with financial markets, they're not familiar with trading, can you explain like what do you mean by that?
Every slate, you have tons of contests that you can play. Over the long run, you can pretty well deduce like what your ROI will be in that contest. If you're trying to put, let's say, $500 in play, you're going to have to play contests where your long-term ROI might be 10 to 20%. I think it's okay to like, this is the amount I want to risk, and there's no reason to move up. And people don't want to hear that, but that's a perfectly fine decision to make, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's definitely tons of people who just grind out really strong ROIs with very little downside because they know their limit and they become really good at those stakes. Even myself, every buy-in I put in, if it's something I normally play, I'm not as conscientious about it. But if it's something I don't normally play, I'm then going and being like, what objectively, like, should I be playing this contest? Looking at the lineups in that contest.
Who am I making my money against?
Yeah. Am I playing against like the top 10 people on the Roto Grinders leaderboard? I mean, that's stupid. Like, I don't want to play tennis against Roger Federer. Like, at the end of the day, you're going to lose. Like, I don't think I'm the greatest person ever at DFS, but for the majority, I pick my spots very well. Even when I play the higher stakes, I have a read on that slate, or there's a reason why I think that it makes sense to play those higher stakes.
It's like a Warren Buffett or Charlie Mungerism, where it's like, you know, the edges of your circle of competence. Like, it's like the things you know, you're very comfortable betting on, but as you get farther away from that like center focus, you have some doubt, and there's a certain point where you're like, I don't know how I'm making money in this, and so it's better to just avoid it. Is that roughly how you'd look at it?
Yep.
And so one of the things, as far as specific strategy goes, is a lot of people watching this, like, they're not going to be able to follow and do exactly what you do, but there's one thing you and I were talking about that I thought would be really helpful, where it's like, you take a lot of stands.
I mean, if it depends on the stand you're going to take. If a guy's going to be like really low owned, you don't need to have 30% to like take a stand on that guy. You can just allocate a portion.
Taking a stand is relative.
Yes, it's a relative thing.
Yeah.
This guy's 1% owned. You don't need 50. Like, if you get 50% of him, like, and he hits, like, congrats, you win all the money. But you also win all the money if you have 10% and he hits, or 5% and he hits, and you're safer when he doesn't hit because the other 95% or 90% of your portfolio is still like live to cash. But like, you don't see like the best portfolio managers, you don't see most of them like going 80% on a stock that they like. Some do, but like most of them are like, okay, I like this stock, I'm going to allocate 2 to 5% of my portfolio. It's an objective allocation.
One of the things I've also heard though is a lot of people just don't know where to begin, because like, all right, like, should I take a stand here? Should I go with my gut? What do I do? And so I guess, how would you advise them to navigate that?
I think a lot of other people have said this over the years in various forms, but just don't, like, if you're going to be heavy-handed, like, I think you need data to support it, and saying this guy is bad is not data.
Yeah, don't lock anyone, and probably don't outright exclude them except for like rare circumstances or whatever else. But like,
if you do, it's fine to exclude someone, but you have to have like data-driven reason for that. And saying he sucks is not a data-driven reason. I always have a data-driven reason, and I could be wrong.
What would be like just an example of like a data-driven reason?
Well, just like you think that the market is overreacting to snap share based on a guy coming back from injury or something, that, and you can be wrong. There's nothing wrong with being wrong. I'm wrong hundreds of times a week and everything, but like, it's just, what's the cost of being wrong versus being right? And that should drive how you're allocating.
It's easy for us to gloss over, and I think for a lot of people who might be more casual, like data driven, like, I don't have some model, I don't have some spreadsheet looking at this. It's like, you can have that, and I think in a lot of cases you do, but you're not saying like it has to be this like algorithmic data driven thing. You're more just saying like, have a reason.
You can quantify that in data, in a model. I'm sure many players do. Many players better than me do a better job at it. But like, you can also do it with the gut. I do it every week. But I think most people, if they use their gut, can guess the guys that will be steam. It's not always like that hard and set. It can be sort of just a feel thing, and SaberSim gives you the great tools with a feel to make those stands.
Probably not like a easy thing to answer, but how have you developed that gut and that feel of those kind of things?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, I guess. A lot of it is, I think, holding yourself accountable, and I think this is very, very hard for most people, and probably harder than actually making the good gut calls, is when you're wrong, you can't just be like, I made the stand, I was wrong, but I was really right. Like, you have to be wrong sometimes. You have to have the introspection to understand, I was wrong and this is why, and then try to sort of internalize that and use that new knowledge going forward. That I always call it getting 2% better every day, and just compounding it, right? Whether that's this slight mistake that I made this one time, or something that happened close to lock and I didn't respond correctly to it. Next time, this is what I need to do. And then the next time that same situation comes up, just identifying, this is how you're wrong. This is how maybe you could have prevented that wrongness. Maybe
could I have known this?
Yes. It's not whether you're wrong or right. It's whether that thought process was right or wrong. You can normally see something that can at least tell you, I was at least sniffing in the right direction, even if I maybe wasn't quite on the money, or I was way off, I'm an idiot, and I shouldn't use that ever again, which should happen to most people a large amount. It should happen to everyone.
Yeah, and it's just, to wrap up, I mean, I'll just add the way I look at it is like taking a stand is relative to the field, like we said. And even if you're just using what Saber says, SaberSim is taking stands on its own. And so you should look into those spots where Saber gives you high leverage plays and just make sure you agree with them, because you might not think we're completely wrong, but if you think we're being the tout screaming about this guy, because sometimes we are, even if we're not actually like literally screaming about it, tone it down and match the field. And I think that's where people got to look at it both ways. But I think this is a good way for people to kind of start thinking a little deeper, but hopefully also realize it doesn't need to be some unapproachable way of doing it. So really appreciate the time, Spencer. It was a lot of fun. Hopefully we'll get some more content out of you in the future with another couple milli wins. We'll see what watches we get.
But maybe.
No, at the very least, so really do appreciate the time, and it was a lot of fun chatting.
Yeah,
thanks,
likewise.
Spencer.
Thanks, Andy.
All right, see ya.